Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, April 17th, and this is the About to Break podcast. I want to take a moment and thank everybody who's been supporting the show on Patreon over at patreon.com/about to break. For as little as $1 or more a month, you can become one of the producers. You get some exclusive content. We're getting ready to upload some bonus episodes that aren't available here, and also just show your love. Thank you to everyone who's been doing that. Something you can do that costs no money but makes a huge difference and helps people find the shows by going on to iTunes and leaving a 5-star review. We're very grateful to have 5-star reviews across the board from so many people. Thank you to everyone who's been doing that and showing the love. It really does warm my heart when I hear people found out about the show because they were just browsing iTunes and saw the reviews and decided to take a listen. So thank you to everyone who's been doing that. You know, recently we set up a break line. This is a phone number that you can call. We want to hear your thoughts about the show, challenges that you may be facing, and it's always fun to get little messages like this over on the break line.
Hey, this is Rob, about to break. I've had some good things happen, some bad things happen recently, but the episode with Nick Paul was really great. Keep it up, man.
So take a moment today and give us a call at 323-524-7456. Let us know what you think about the show. Let us know. Maybe you've got a big breaking moment, either a good one or maybe a challenging one, a way you feel like you're about to break through, or maybe you feel like you're about to break down. Let us know over on the break line, and who knows, you might even be on a future episode here of the About to Break podcast. Again, it's the 17th of April, and if you're listening to this the day it comes out, tonight I'll be performing at Scott Neary's Booby Trap. True, like LA circusy variety vibes. Super good stuff, and I'm pumped to be there tonight. So come on out and say hi if you're in town. That's 8 o'clock tonight at King in LA. What else? I don't know what else, other than I'm so excited that we have Bruce Gold on the show. I say this in the episode, but I've had a list on the notes section of my phone for, a couple years now about this show and people that I wanted to talk to, and Bruce Gold's name has been on there so long. But, you know, he and I both travel a lot, and sometimes it's hard. It's like ships passing. But Bruce and I, we made it happen, man. We sat down, and we had a great conversation, and I'm so excited to share it with you all. We sat down at a little cafe. You get to hear the ambient sounds of people making deals or hearts being broken in Los Angeles while we have this conversation. And I'm telling you, the things that Bruce shares on this episode are solid gold. Pun intended. Because his name is Bruce Gold. Sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 109 of the About to Break podcast, my conversation with comedian, magician, and actor Bruce Gold.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Something is about to break.
Hey everybody, welcome to About to Break. I'm your host, Taylor Hughes, and I could not be more delighted to be sitting down with my buddy, Bruce Gold.
Hello.
Thank you for doing this, man.
Hey, I'm delighted to be on the show. I listened to it for a long time now, and it's always great interviews. So
man,
I'll put a stop to that. And,
please. I think I told you this earlier, but since day one, I made a list of people I'd like to sit down and have conversations with. And you were on that list from day one, and this is the first time I think you and I have both been in the same city at the same time.
Right.
And we're doing it.
Yeah, right. Making it happen.
We are.
There's such a wide chasm between an idea and then bringing it to fruition, and we've actually done it.
Right.
So.
And we're doing it the right way. We are sitting at Aroma Cafe in Studio City.
Right. Could not be more LA right now.
Right.
We're two guys sitting at a table with headphones on and microphones.
Yeah, and it's not a small setup we've got. I mean, we've got mic stands, and what I love is that everybody who walks by could care less. Nobody is giving us the time of day. This is so an everyday thing to people.
That's right.
You just recently moved to Studio City, right?
I did. Traveling for a living like I do for so many years, I really like to have a home base. So when I do move, I tend to stay in one spot for a long time. And, I'm really happy to be in Studio City now. It's really central to everything.
How's the neighborhood? You enjoying it?
Fantastic.
That's good.
It's so close to any of the studios or offices of any of the major motion picture companies that it's so easy to delude yourself into believing you have a film career. So pass by a film set, wave at the Disney office.
Right. And this is the part of town where every cafe you drive by or walk by, everybody in that cafe looks like they are
Right.
TV ready.
They're either a social media influencer,
That's the new
or
thing, yeah.
they're a guest star on a long-running sitcom,
Right.
or they've got their computer open and they're completing their screenplay.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it's a very creative city. It's a good vibe and a good energy. You know?
Yeah.
And it's funny, when you tell people in this town what you do in show business, it doesn't matter how obscure it is.
Right.
They generally go, "Oh, yeah, my brother, he does this," you know, or they have such a connection with showbiz that they know what everything is. And
Which is so different from when we're traveling on the road. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure this happens to you all the time. People go, you know, how did you get into this? I've never heard of anyone doing, you know, comedy or magic for a living. Like,
right.
it's so shocking to people to hear that.
Yeah, and then people go like, "So yeah, okay, but what do you do for a job? What do you do in real life?"
Yes.
You know?
Oh yeah.
And that's funny because I got asked that so often that's actually part of my show now.
Is it really?
When I get someone on stage, I'll go,
Yeah.
"So what do you do in real life?"
Oh, that's
And they kind of don't know how to answer that for a moment, and then they usually give me their job description.
Right.
But you know, I when you travel, you have to acquaint people with the
Right.
idea that this isn't just a hobby for the people who do it. This is,
Right.
you know, a life.
I've had so many times. It seems like that question always comes after a very nice compliment. You know, they'll be like, "That was the best entertainment we've ever had, and we can't believe, wow, you came all the way from Los Angeles to be here and do this.
Right.
That's great. What do you do for work?" I'm like, "What?"
Did you not just see? Like, were you not?
Yeah. I have a buddy who's a stand-up, and he jokes with me all the time. He's like, "You know, you and I have the two professions that other people do on the side as like a hobby."
Right.
And it's funny because you have had a career both as a magician and just as a comedian as well. I think a lot of the magicians listening to this probably don't even know that a lot of your work has been just as doing stand-up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really fortunate that I get to perform at the Magic Castle, which is probably the stage I'm most comfortable on.
Yeah.
Palace of Mystery. Many years ago, in the late '80s, I came out to California and I performed on that stage, and then I got booked at Caesars in Tahoe to
Yeah.
be part of a magical review show. And so ever since then, once a year or more often, I am at the castle. And so really, it's the most comfortable place I am. And then people hear about these other things that I do, and that,
Right.
you know, I'm flying around the country doing a corporate or working on a cruise ship or consulting on something. And they assume that is the entire scope of what I do,
Right.
is what they saw me do on stage at the Magic Castle. But I started as a magician as a kid, and then when I got into college, it was right at the moment when stand-up comedy was really breaking.
Oh yeah,
And rooms
Huge
were
boom.
opening all over the country.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know comedy clubs are a fairly new thing in history. I mean, there weren't tons of comedy clubs until like
Right.
the 80s, right? I mean,
Well, early on, before the Comedy Channel and Comedy Central,
Right,
which
yep.
eventually merged,
Yep.
there were these little comedy rooms, and it started to catch on. And what happened is all these nightclub owners are like, "Okay, so you're telling me if I just get a mic stand and a microphone,
yeah, and a bar stool.
I can charge people a cover charge to come in here and sit and listen to the comedian
Yeah.
who'll work for less than my DJ."
Yes.
Oh, so I did a lot of weekend rooms where there
Okay.
was a big mirror ball over my head,
Yep.
like Funky
Yeah.
Town was about to break out at any moment, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of those rooms happened. And then, of course, comedy clubs opened everywhere.
Yeah.
And really the only place to see live stand-up comedy was to go, either you saw it on an HBO special,
Right.
or you went to a comedy club.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
the
yeah.
comedy channels came on TV, and then it started to become a more saturated thing. And then the wave of popularity kind
Yep.
of, you know, crested, and a lot of clubs closed because people weren't spending $20 cover
Right,
when
yeah.
they could stay home and watch stand up on television.
Totally. Yeah.
And then now it's kind of come full circle again, where there's so much material on YouTube,
Right.
and so many great comedians posting
Yeah.
parts of their routines, and yet that's driving people to the comedy clubs to see them live.
Right. Oh yeah.
Because I think people really understand now that seeing the live entertainment and experiencing the things in the
Right.
moment is always different from kind of seeing it third party through the window of your television or your computer screen or your phone. But I'm really getting off on a tangent here.
No,
And you're-
that's great. I we'll come back to it. But I do want to say this. I mean, Copperfield understood this from day one with his specials. The whole point of the special was to get people to buy theater tickets.
Right.
Penn and Teller do the same thing. Like you do the TV stuff so that people will come see you live. And now
Exactly.
yeah, you're right. Comics right now. I mean, Mark Maron every night of the week is at the Comedy Store, working out stuff, and it's just it's really cool to see kind of this resurgence coming. But you've gotten to see now both of these.
Right. So when I came out to California, I had already been doing stand-up on the road for a decade.
Okay. Where was home for you before that?
I started in South Florida.
Yep.
I grew up in Palm Beach Gardens.
Yes.
And then I used to drive an hour to Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
To do their open mic night. And then they very quickly made me a regular. And that meant I got to drive an hour down and an hour back 5 nights a week to go up at the end of the show to do 10 minutes after all of the other comedians for no money.
Yeah.
And so I paid my dues that way, and I did that for more than a year.
Yeah.
And then I drove to Atlanta where the Punchline was.
Were you doing magic as well at this time, or
no,
was this
I was
only stand-up?
Well, so here's what happened. Back then, magic... Other comedians looked at magic like, oh, you went to the magic shop and bought your act.
It's like a hook or a gimmick. Or,
and they hated it, right?
Same thing with like a guy using a guitar on stage. They
They saw it as a crutch.
Yep.
So I had initially started where I had some magic in the show.
Yeah.
And then I took it out completely. And I'm like, well, I can do it without it.
Yeah.
And so I did stand-up. And then when I moved out to California, I was working primarily as a stand-up.
Yep.
And I got a manager. And... the manager had an act on cruise ships.
Okay.
And she goes, well, if you work on a cruise ship for 1 week, you'll make what you would have made in 2 weeks at a comedy club.
Right.
So you can work 1 week on a ship and then be home a week for auditions. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. You're like, that's
So I started working 2 weeks a month on ships and then being home 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
So what I was told was, if you go on as a magician, there's so many magicians.
Right.
But there aren't a lot of really good stand-ups working in the marketplace.
Okay.
They'll never have 2 magicians on the same voyage, but they will have 2 comics on the same voyage.
Got it.
So you have a much greater chance of being booked.
Is that
as
because
a comedian.
There's the chance a lot of magicians, it's like if people see a rope trick, they think they saw the same thing. You know what I mean?
In the minds of the booker,
right?
Magicians, and it's a criticism that's not unfounded.
Right.
Magicians are very similar in what they do.
Right.
But comedians bring a different persona, a different sensibility, point of view, and material.
Right. Yeah.
And they might both joke about the ship and the things that passengers are experiencing, or guests, as we call them.
Right. Yes.
But they will do it from a different point of view. It's mostly the purview of the bookers that they don't want to book 2 magicians on the same voyage. So I was able to work steadily as a comedian. So now people who know me through the Magic Castle, when they talk to me about cruise ships, and I tell them, well, I've done stand-up on ships for decades, and they're like, oh.
You mean stand-up magic? Or
yeah, they think that the act that I do at the Magic Castle, which I love to do, is what I do on cruise ships, and it's not. Now, the benefit to me is, not only did I get to work steadily, but I got to work with every magician in the business.
Oh, that's great.
So I'd be on with, the Nick Lewins and the Martin Lewises and Jeff Hobson. And
see, that's great because for most people, the cruise world is so isolating because you're there by yourself.
Yeah.
But you were able to come in and also be able to geek out about magic, I'm sure, and
my gosh, when
workshop stuff.
When Nick comes on, or when Martin comes on, it's like our own mini 2-person magic convention for an entire week.
Yeah,
and it's the greatest thing. It's so great. The ships are a very interesting market because as good a gig as it is, it's also terribly isolating.
Right.
Everyone tells you how lucky you are. Oh, you get to this and that and that. Yeah. But what they don't realize is when they envision themselves doing it, they would never dream of going on a vacation by themselves. Most people, right?
Yeah, you're right. But
you leave your home alone. So you overnight in a hotel alone. You go to the ship alone.
Yeah.
You're alone for the entire week, and then you repeat the process.
Fantastic meals by yourself.
Right. You're on the beach alone. And of course, if you're a sociable person, yes, you'll meet people.
Right.
But it can be very isolating. So when you work on board, the other entertainers become your surrogate family.
Right.
And then when you work steadily for a particular line, as I did, those people do become like a family to you. And they're some of my dearest, closest friends are people that I've been working with for many years.
Yeah. Wow, that's wild. It amazes me that you've had like these 2 careers going. Well, and also acting and writing and so many different things that you've done. Right. I am a little bit geeking out because as a magician primarily who does comedy in my act, I have for years fantasized about one day just putting down magic and only going on stage with no props. And it seems so exciting.
When you're schlepping the cases back and forth and suddenly you can go up, with what's in your pockets. So it's a very different thing. Somebody said once that a good comic has to get a laugh every 15 seconds.
Right.
And the way that magic works is generally it's not geared to deliver that kind of velocity of laughter and punchlines. So my challenge was always to imbue the magic that I did with enough lines so that it could stand on its own.
Right.
And then for a time, what I would do is I started working mainly as a middle act, and that used to be the structure of clubs.
Okay.
3 acts. And what's funny is now, like the Comedy and Magic Club in Hermosa Beach on the weekends, it's 10 comedians.
10 comics
because
on a night.
everyone is, become so accustomed to watching things that are 7 minutes or 3 minutes on their phones.
That's true.
I was told that, generally audiences don't have the patience to sit through 20, 30-minute sets from people.
Yeah.
When the younger people come in on the weekend, and they prefer to give them this constantly changing lineup of talent. Now, of course, the exception is when people come to see a name act or someone who is a name within the industry.
Right.
And then they want to see the whole hour-long show.
Wow.
But, so I try to imbue my stuff with a lot of humor. And that really, my education was in the comedy clubs, getting to see that driving back and forth to Fort Lauderdale for no money actually turned out to be a super valuable investment for me.
Yeah.
Because I got to see so many comedians from different regions of the country and assess what made them funny and what was their character like, what was their point of view, how did they deliver their material, and how do they build momentum? And it was such a really great training ground.
Different joke structure and different things that work. And
yeah.
Oh, that's great. So you just from college, you were doing comedy clubs, and then you jumped on ships pretty quickly. Like, what was the?
Well, started as a magician, like I say, as a kid, and did the backyard carnivals and birthday parties, and then worked my way up to corporate events.
Was there like a magic shop in your hometown?
Yeah, there's a gentleman, the late Barry Gibb, not no relation to the Gibbs, plural, but Barry Gibb, and he had a magic shop that he worked at. Paul Diamond from Florida. Magicians will know that name. Very famous gentleman.
I've seen his post. He had a great poster back in the day.
Yes.
Paul Diamond,
And he had these kiosks that looked like a circus wagon.
Okay.
And they were surrounded with windows that had display windows of tricks.
Oh, that's cool.
My parents used to drop me off at the mall.
Yeah.
And I would spend hours just staring into the windows, imagining that I was going to save up to $16 to buy this trick called the appearing cane. And then I would be a professional who had real props, right? And I would kind of befriended and harassed the people who worked there.
Yeah.
And one of them was Barry. And that's kind of how the mentorship of magic works. In a sense, you find a magician who imparts
magic really is a fraternal thing. It's one of the few art forms where, granted there's competition in any business, but it really is. I think because magic's such a unique thing for someone to be interested in, you have like an instant connection with someone when you go like, oh, you like it too.
Yeah,
people are generally willing to help support.
Right, and the people who who work in the magic shops generally, if they care, and most of them do, they steer you towards what will be right for you.
Yes.
And they fill in the gaps between the instructions and performing.
Yes, because the instructions they were always written in like the 30s.
And they give you some tips about, how to be on stage and how to develop. I think every kid, no matter what they're interested in, they probably go through this period where they try on a lot of different coats, so to speak, to see what fits for them and what doesn't.
Right.
And I mean, there's kids who look like, I guess you'd look at them and you'd identify them as being very nerdy, and yet they want to be like a Chris Angel. And so their physical appearance or the way they present themselves is so in opposition to that. And then when they start performing like Chris Angel, suddenly it reaches an unintended level of comedy.
Right.
And that's not always a detriment to discover something like that.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
But it's finding yourself within the craft, and that goes through all of the arts. You try a little bit of everything until you find what fits for you.
That's beautiful. I tell people all the time, they say, they ask me, what did you do first, comedy or magic? And for me, it was magic. Mm-hmm. And then when the tricks didn't work, comedy came into the act pretty quickly.
Yeah, right.
You learn to just make it part of the show.
Right.
And then you go, well, that was really fun. How can I make that happen again or create a moment like that for people to experience,
Yeah.
Wow. So you're doing ships. At what point did you know you wanted to make this a career? Was it ever a moment where you're like, I'm going to become a professional comedian and magician, or did you just start doing it and never stop?
Well, when I started out as a magician, I had aspirations in line with what the marketplace was at that time, which was Vegas.
Yeah.
You were going to be a quote unquote big magician in Vegas.
Oh yeah. Have your
own.
And
that meant like a Siegfried and Roy kind of
theater
thing.
with your name out front.
Right. And then in college, comedy really caught on, and I thought, oh, well, this is a pathway to doing a sitcom.
Right.
Because Harry Anderson had landed Night Court. And I thought, oh, okay, so it's possible to go from doing comedy magic into a sitcom.
Right.
And so I studied theater in college, and I took acting classes, and I learned the nuts and bolts of performing as an actor. And as being a theater person also helped me become a showman and understand how to present and engage with an audience. So all that was very valuable. And I did some television commercials. I did a kind of rather famous commercial that's more than a decade old by now, but it's one of the award winners from the Got Milk ad campaign. Yep. And I was the magician in the seniors' home who made the milk vanish in the top hat. And then
they all come after you.
Octogenarians climb out of their wheelchairs and try to beat the crap
They're all
out of me.
eating like cookies and cake.
Right? And the fun part of that commercial is when I went in to audition for it, and I'll tell you a story about that in a moment. But I went into audition for it, and they let me do whatever magic I wanted to do.
Okay.
So my take on the character was that this was a guy who would have more bravado than talent.
Right.
And he would be totally confident and not flamboyant, but big in what he did.
Boisterous.
Super confident. And it would go wrong. And you would see that crack in half and reveal this human underneath who was
terrified.
And then he would realize that he had broken character and then leap back into being the bravado again. And so the juxtaposition between those two things was very funny to them in the audition room. And one of the things I did was I had a deck of cards, and I did a couple pressure fans. Which for people who don't know what that is, that's a very artful way to fan out a deck of 52 cards so that all of the faces, the pips show on the cards.
Right.
And then close it up, and then I'm shuffling, and I've got this whole expression of, aren't I just the best?
Yeah.
And then I squeeze the cards, and they spring out of my hands and shower down around me.
Yeah.
And then I watch them rain down.
Yeah.
And then my eyes come back to theirs, and then they see the terror that I've done something wrong.
Right.
And then I leap right back into the bravado character and go back into the next trick.
Yeah.
And they love that. So that's kind of what landed me the commercial. I had to come back for 2 more auditions. This is a big major national campaign.
Yeah.
And I was up against comedians and magicians in it. But I think some magicians went in and they played it as a magician, but I played it as an actor playing the role of a magician.
Right.
And had decided what my character would be and how I would present it.
Yep.
But I tell you a very funny story about, or at least I find it amusing about
the audition?
Going on auditions in California when you show up as a magician. Often any magician who has ever had aspirations of acting will be at that initial call for whatever role it is.
Right.
And I walked into, I think it was a Honda commercial, and my very good friend, Jonathan Levitt, who's a brilliant actor and magician, ended up booking it. But I didn't see him at the audition. He obviously had come in either before or after I was there. But I walked into the room, and there's always a guy there who is taking it way too serious and has not made the distinction between doing a magic show and auditioning for a TV commercial.
Got it.
So in the corner is a guy wearing full-on tuxedo with tails. Next to him, 3 cages of rabbits and doves. Next to that, an assistant in a spangly little dress, right? And I look over at him thinking, does he think he's going to go in and set up an entire show? Because normally when you walk into the room to audition at a commercial, especially at the initial one, you're in there a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it's over, and you're like, I guess it's over. I did
fast,
right?
Yeah. You come in, you read the lines, and then thank you, and right. And I look over, and then to top this tableau that I see from his vest, I see the head of a little capuchin monkey peek out and look at me.
No.
And then he pushes the monkey's head back into his coat. So apparently, under his vest, he's got this monkey. I so wanted to see that audition.
Right.
But of course, there's no way. It's in a separate room, and you don't get to see anybody else audition. But I just, in my head, I created what it must have been like.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And, with the monkey.
Paint the picture for us.
So, right, yeah. Like you walk in, and then generally they say hello, and maybe they ask if you have any questions about the thing, and then they go, and then you do the lines, and I can just see him, beginning, and then the monkey's head peeking out, or producing the monkey. I'm like, you do understand that the role is for a magician for a car commercial.
What is the monkey?
I'm not sure how the monkey fits in, but anyway, God bless him for really going the extra mile.
Oh my goodness! What have you learned about going on auditions that could help people? Because I know a lot of folks listening to this right now are probably on their way right now to an audition.
Right.
And it's a unique experience for those who haven't had it.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned?
They say there's always the 3 auditions that you do. There's the one you do in the car on the way there.
Yep.
There's the one you do in the room.
Right.
And there's the one you do in the car on the way back.
Right.
Where you correct everything you think that you may have done wrong in the audition. But Bryan Cranston said something that I thought was really valuable.
Okay.
And he said that you're trying to do good work. And when you go into the audition room, into the casting office.
Right.
And whatever type, there's many of these casting offices in town will be doing 3 or 4 projects in their different little rooms. It's like a big hallway with small offices.
Yep.
And each one is having an audition for a different project.
Right.
And so when I moved to California, one of the first auditions I went to was for a game show host. Which, if you know me, oddly seem a little like typecasting. But anyway, so I look, and there's a bench. Lined up on the bench are 8 gorgeous, leggy blondes in black dresses, like straight out of like a Robert Palmer video for people who know that era.
Right.
And all of them are used to being the most beautiful woman in the room anywhere they go. Like and now they're seated next to 7 other girls exactly like them. And the tension on these girls' faces was unmistakable.
Right.
So when you go to the audition and you're in the casting room, you're there to do good work. It's not about socializing and yakking or making jokes, which a lot of people do because they're nervous.
Right.
It's about preparing yourself for the material that you're going to do, and then understanding that you are not in competition with these other people.
Right.
What you are trying to do is to go and do the best work that you can do, and you put your focus on that.
Yeah, see, that's really good. A lot of people probably look at it like a job interview, that I'll start the work once I get the job.
Mm-hmm.
But you're basically saying the audition is the job. Like, go in there and do it the best you can.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to fall into the trap of comparison. Like the girls on the bench, they're all comparing themselves to every other girl there.
Yeah.
But you just have to go in with the choices you have made about the role, which they always say, make strong choices, bring something of yourself to the role and show them what you have.
Yeah.
And don't concern yourself with what other people are doing. Try to do the best work you can do. Yeah. That's all you have control over. It helps keep you out of your head, and it lessens the anxiety that comes with comparison.
Ah, that's so good. That's so good. You have for years been one of my, I don't want to make sure I say this on here, you've been one of my favorite hosts.
Oh.
Not only in the Palace, but I mean, everywhere that I've seen you, like you were just the consummate host.
Kind of you.
And you have this ability to present your material and connect with the audience, and yet at the same time, think with the entire show in mind. Mm-hmm. And I think so few people do that. A lot of people come out, they do their thing, and then they're like, who am I bringing up now? Oh, it's so-and-so.
Right. That's that whole thing about, like, it's almost like you're doing the show, then you stop the show.
Yep.
You get out a card, you read something.
Right.
Like, what happened to the show? Why did the show stop?
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing that when I was a kid magician that, the other kids would do. They would come forward and they would present the trick that they were doing, and then they'd get their little applause when the trick was over, and then they'd turn their back on the audience, put one prop away, get another prop out, turn back around, as if somehow the show stopped and everyone froze in place and time stood still.
Yeah, we're at a commercial break. No one's watching you.
They say in acting, and when I coach people, I use a lot of screenwriting and acting metaphors.
Yeah.
But they say in acting that when you're auditioning, you need to keep your life going.
Yeah.
Even when you're on the page.
Okay.
So you don't hold the script down with your head down and read down. You hold the script up with your face forward. And whatever emotion and experience you're conveying, you continue that as you go to pick up the next chunk of dialogue off the page and you bring it. So there's no start, stop. And it's the same thing for being an MC. In the show, you're trying to be authentic and in the moment and do your act. And when it comes time to bring out the next person, you try to roll that in as seamlessly as possible.
Right.
And then you have all the little chores that an MC has, where you want to make sure that that audience is in the state of mind and frame for the act you're going to present. Like, for instance, when I work in the Palace of Mystery at the Magic Castle, if I know that the next act is a silent act, and there's some very chatty, maybe drunky people in the audience, I will take a moment to, if I haven't already done it during my act, I will find a way to let them know that they need to not pull focus because the silent act isn't going to be able to say anything.
Yeah, they don't even have a mic.
So it's my responsibility to make sure that the room is prepared for them.
That's great.
To come out. And that usually will happen during my act.
Yep.
And when it's really bad, occasionally I'll say, okay, look, I understand that you want to be part of the show while I'm up here, but when the next gentleman comes out, he really deserves your respect. So, and that's really very on the nose, which I normally don't do. I try to dismiss things in the most subtle way possible. If someone is, first of all, you have to assess, is this person legitimately disruptive and trying to interrupt the show or pull focus, or are they actually enjoying the show and trying to be a part of the fun?
Yeah.
And so my rule is I dispatch people with a hand that is no heavier than the one that they use in the show. So if they're being very affronting, then I meet that.
Yeah.
But in the kindest way I can.
Yeah.
But I would never, if someone said something simple, would I slam them like a comedian often would. They'd, hey pal, blah, 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 and really slam them. And that's not necessary. I mean, one of the things I will say to people who are a little drunky and overly enthusiastic or chatty is, I'll say, just keep in mind for you tonight, the magic word is Uber.
Right. Yeah.
Which is my way of saying, I hope you're not driving home because you've had an awful lot to drink. And I've given them that attention.
Right.
You know?
But you haven't done it in a way that's like, look at this boozer, right? Yeah, and I feel like, especially in comedy clubs, I feel like a lot of comics haven't learned the art of that. I love the way you just described that, of not using a hand that's stronger than what they used.
Yeah.
Because some people is just like, they've got their lines and they're like the harshest, most heaviest comebacks ever.
Right. There's somebody said something about, I think the quote something like about being tactful or charming.
Yeah.
And that was the ability to tell someone to go to hell in a way that is so charming they actually look forward to the trip. And so
that's great.
So my persona is such that I try not to really disparage anybody.
Yeah.
I try to dismiss them with as gentle a hand as I can.
That's so good.
Yeah. It's just about maintaining control.
You have a unique experience that a lot of people don't, in that you work in so many different environments, from doing comedy clubs to doing the Magic Castle where people came to see a magic show, to doing huge theaters and ships.
Yeah.
How do you maintain control in these different environments? It's one thing to be in a small, intimate setting, and then it's another thing to go into this massive theater. You know what I mean? Is there a switch that you flip on where you go like, okay, I need to play this bigger, or I need to...
Well, two distinctions. One, people always respond to authenticity.
Yeah.
So no matter how broad your character is, if you're authentic to that character, people appreciate that, and that's very engaging. If you're in a very intimate setting, it's almost required that you are more authentic and more in the moment and addressing reality.
Right.
Nothing's quite so uncomfortable as when, like, let's say you're in the Palace and there's 160 seats in that room,
Right.
and something in the room happens that pulls the focus of everybody in there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you ignore it.
Yeah.
You are not addressing the reality of the situation.
Oh, that's good.
So you have to really take control and take ownership of that moment in
Yeah.
a way that you don't have to in a room of 1,000 people,
Right.
where it only disturbed a very small pocket of people.
Yes.
Maybe
Yes,
just the immediate
yep.
dozen people around that person. That's one thing. And the other is, in a big room, if you rehearse your timing of things and you don't deviate from that,
Okay.
you're not allowing yourself and the audience to experience those genuine moments that are taking place within your show, which is what they came for. I like to say that chaos is
Yep.
infinitely more fascinating than harmony. That's why no one stops to watch traffic until there's an accident.
Right.
So
Right.
in the moment that this spontaneous thing happens, you have riveted the attention of the audience.
Yep.
And now you have to take ownership of that moment. If you ignore that moment,
Right.
you're not in the show.
Yes.
And it's obvious to them because
Yeah.
you ignored it and you're sticking to whatever script. And that's part of the being a showman and knowing your material so well
Yeah.
that you don't just know your material,
Right.
you know how to deviate and then find your way back.
See, I'm so glad you're sharing this, because this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. You have the ability, you obviously, with your acting ability and your scripting and writing ability, you're one of the few guys I've seen that can deliver a written line in a way that seems spontaneous and like it's the first time you're hearing it.
Right, right.
And yet at the same time, you are not so committed to the words that you've prepared to not pick up any opportunity for fun along the way.
Exactly.
And so many people, I see them missing great opportunities to connect with an audience through a shared moment that's unique,
Yes.
but they're so stuck to, this is the word I say while I do the thing. I got to keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be able to improvise within the framework or the outline that you've created for yourself.
Yeah.
One of the other distinctions about playing for a really big house, and early in my career, I had an opportunity to open for Kenny G at the Bob Carr Stadium in Orlando,
Yeah.
which seats 3,000 people. And prior to this, I think the biggest audience I worked for had probably been 300.
It's quite a jump.
So I got in there and I was doing stand up.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, from the first laugh, I was thrown because when they laughed, there were 3,000 people there.
Right.
And the laugh hit you like an ocean wave. It came in
Yeah.
and washed over you and then went back.
Wow.
Instead of being this immediate punchy kind of
Yeah.
it was like this roar that went.
You're hearing it. Yeah.
Because not everyone in a crowd of 3,000
Hears
laughed
it at the same time.
At the same time. So that was a
Wow, that's
fascinating
fascinating.
experience, and it taught me that I couldn't marry myself to the timing of my jokes.
Yeah.
That I had to adjust for the punchlines. That's the thing that comics do generally better than magicians. Comics know to wait for the laugh to crest before they move to the next piece. Magicians often will stick to the way that they do it. We take a second pause here and a 2-second pause here.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so when I'm playing, like often when I'm performing on a cruise ship, there are theaters which rival theaters on land. They're
They're massive.
like
Beautiful.
1,200, 1,400 seats, some of them with
Right.
balconies, and they're
Right.
gigantic. So what happens is a very large crowd will roll a laugh in a way that a small crowd may not.
Okay.
And what this does is it gives you 3 or 4 extra beats while that laugh is cresting,
Yeah.
which gives you extra opportunity to make another expression, to pull another face, to do another look.
Yeah.
And so there's this where I might tell a joke and then get a small laugh and then I move on. In a bigger room, the laugh might roll a little bit. And at that point, I will then stop and I will look at people in the audience and get acknowledgement, and then look to the other side and get this recognition from them. Even if it's just as simple as a look and a nod.
Right.
Like as if to say, right? And this is how you roll into that. And sometimes I can do body postures or expressions that capitalize on that. And they give you that extra breathing room.
How quickly did you learn to adjust to that? When you first went into a large theater like that, was it Was it like a big wake up call? Did you go, I need to learn some techniques here?
Yeah, you learn real fast to hold for the laugh, or you're stepping on your own material. You know, you don't
find yourself starting to go ahead and then be like, oh, they're still clapping.
Yeah,
still
right. It's a delightfully shocking thing when people are laughing more than you expect them to, and you're like, oh, I guess this is funny.
Well, okay, yeah. But you say so myself.
Yeah. I mean, I'll also say something else about performing for a different size crowd. Often when we as magicians are taught to perform on a platform or a cabaret or a stage, unlike close-up magic where you're literally engaging a handful of people, might even be only one person, when you're on stage, there's an audience of people. And you want to try to connect and engage with everyone. And they say often to new performers, look over the heads of the audience to the back of the room. And no, in a small room, that doesn't work.
Right. And people, you see people do that in the Palace or even in the Peller or the Parlor.
Right.
And people, they think that the audience thinks they're looking at them. And it's like, no, I can totally tell you're looking at the backlight or whatever you're looking at.
If you're on a big stage in a big theater, that works, but not in a smaller venue. So there's a technique I like to call painting the room.
Yes. Talk about this. I've heard you share this before, and it's fantastic.
So when you look out at the audience, you want to imagine they're your canvas in a sense.
Yep.
And you want to use your eye contact to paint the room.
Yeah.
And you will look at all points of the room. When I'm on a cruise ship that has a theater with 1,400 seats with an entire second tier balcony, right? I don't just perform forward. I will look up into my left and then up into my right.
Yep.
And I do it when these things are natural and motivated by a line that I'm singing. But by the time I'm several minutes into the show, there is no part of that room I haven't looked directly at. I've painted the room with my eye contact.
Yep.
And then when I finish the first coat, I go back I do it again. And then the rule of thumb is that you can look directly at someone up front for about 3 seconds before it starts to get creepy.
It starts to get awkward.
Because if I'm talking and then I look directly at someone in the front row, and then 1,000, 2 1,000,
totally,
3 1,000, now I'm breaking eye contact, like looking somewhere else. If I continue to stare at them, now it starts to get uncomfortable for them, right?
Yeah.
But that's just a little rule of thumb about eye contact. I always say paint the room, you know?
Yeah, we were we've got a group we get together with on a regular, or as much as we can with all of us traveling. And recently we were together and Simon was talking about this and you were talking about painting the room. It was such a unique experience to go, oh my goodness, like wow, like you really feel, the disconnect as you take too long to look at people.
I was in Vegas, and you talk about, the job of an entertainer being to connect with the audience.
Yeah.
And I went to see Donnie and Marie.
Okay. Yeah.
I had my mom and sister with me, and this will be a great show to take them to. And we went to see Donnie and Marie.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
They didn't become the icons that they are without learning about how to connect with an audience.
Really?
And by the time that show was over, you felt like you knew them, like they were your personal friends.
Wow.
And the way that they conducted themselves with the audience, and their authenticity and coming out to the audience and speaking directly to them, and didn't feel canned, didn't feel like a script. They really engaged with the audience. And these are like the little mental notes you make as a performer. When you see someone do something really well like that, you're like, oh, I get it. I see now. Huh?
Yep.
That's how you connect with people.
That's so good. Those are the things when I watch a show that I look for. I mean, it's one thing to go, oh, that was a neat song they sang, or that was a cool, a graphic that they had behind them. But it's those little moments. It's the eye contact. It's the posture. It's, sitting down in a certain moment when you tell a story. Those things really do help you connect on a different level with people.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. I've got to ask you, is there, of all these different things you've done, is there a show that comes to mind that is one of your favorite moments on stage? Do you have like a really fond memory? And it doesn't have to be some. It could be a really cool opportunity, or maybe it was just a show where something fun happened that you were like, oh, that was a great something you look back on.
I would say I'm probably about 1 cup of coffee away from being fully cognizant
Yeah.
to recall these things.
Right.
but I will say
Yeah.
that the true delight for me comes in those spontaneous moments when something happens
Yeah.
that no one has ever said before.
Right.
And you get to experience that joy and that laughter with the audience.
Right.
And as you become more proficient as a performer, you learn to give more opportunities for those moments to happen.
Right.
You you give up control of the reins a little bit.
Because you know you could redirect if you need to.
Redirect. So for me, it's always the spontaneous thing that someone says. And I'll think of one in a moment. The moment I'm not trying to think of one, I know.
No, that's good. I love those spontaneous moments. I had, and I love whenever. So I'll say this. I had a moment where something I called the spectator the wrong name. I had a person in the audience, and we had been talking, and I'd been calling them by the proper name, and then out of nowhere, this woman's name was Sherry, and I called her Brenda. And everyone, like the whole audience, screeched to a halt because I had been saying Sherry to her throughout this whole time, and then for whatever reason, I called her Brenda. This was in the parlor at the Magic Castle, and then I noticed it and was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't even know where Brenda's name came from. I'm so sorry, Sherry." And I went on. Well, about 5 minutes later in the show, the door. So you know the parlor well. You know the door that goes backstage to the palace from the parlor.
Yeah,
that door comes flying open, and this woman who has completely had too much to drink is like Tasmanian devil spinning into the room, and she's like, "Hey, everybody!" And it got really quiet, and everyone looked at her, and I just went, "Brenda, that's where she is." I just took the moment to "I'm so sorry, everybody," and slowly walked Brenda out the room to the other side and out the door. But it was just that little spontaneous moment that, can sometimes throw you, but it's just like, make the most of it and have fun with it. And just roll with it.
I did Jeff Hobson created this brilliant show called The Illusionarium.
Oh, yes.
And it was on Norwegian Caribbean lines for several seasons. And when he left, I took over his role. Talk about big shoes to fill. And I did not fill his shoes. I bought my own pair, so I wouldn't have to, compare myself directly, because no one's going to do what Jeff does and bring what he does to a role. So I brought my own take on it, and it was a very fun role to play. And in it, I'm doing a bit with a gentleman on stage, and I borrowed his money.
Yeah.
And it has vanished. And I'm trying to get him to leave stage now without his money. And this guy happened to be a police officer. When I said, "What do you do in real life?"
Yeah.
He says, "I'm a cop." And then he stares me down.
Oh, he was not messing around.
People were like, "Whoa." And I'm waiting for him to break and laugh.
And he was committed to it.
He's not. So for the whole routine, he's kind of like I'm feeling like I've got to go get my license and registration, the whole routine.
Isn't that?
And it was a very odd dynamic, which was riveting for the audience.
Yeah, because it's almost like a role reversal.
Right.
Like all of a sudden he's the authority.
Right. And then finally at the end of the trick, when it reaches its climax and he gets his money back in a way that he and the audience never expected.
Right.
You see this moment where he kind of nods and acknowledges what's happened in this very withdrawn kind of way. And then he hugs me.
Oh, that's great.
And it was a very funny moment for the audience because it was so out of character for what he was doing. And I realized in that moment he was just taking the piss out of me, more or less, the whole show to see if he could intimidate me. Oh, and so I was using my comic bravado as if to in that vulnerable yet bravado. Part of my character is my on stage persona. It's slightly egocentric, but it's dismissed by a tremendous vulnerability underneath it.
So likable.
I let it crack, and I let you see the danger and the human behind it.
Right.
And so it played very well into this character, to knock his bravado down a bit. And I actually create routines with that intention. There's one routine that I do with a woman on stage, and the whole idea is that she's holding a prediction, which is supposed to be me, as far as the audience knows.
Okay.
So I start asking her questions, pretending not to know that she's holding this photo of me.
Right.
And I ask her these questions, and the audience correctly intuits that I'm trying to get her to say yes to these flattering things I'm asking about the character.
About yourself. Yeah.
And she's saying no to each one.
Which is hilarious.
Which is hilarious to them to see this slightly pompous character knock down a few pegs.
Yeah.
And then in the end, it works out. But, it's fun to play with the character in that way.
Yeah. And the self-deprecation of it, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Magicians so famously have a reputation for being imperious.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember I was working with Franz Harari, whom I've worked with off and on for years as a creative consultant. And he was doing a show in Atlantic City. So he brought me in to give him some directorial notes. And prior to this, early in his career, he was a lot of flash and sequence. And I say, well, now you're in jeans, right? And T-shirts. And that's for a reason. But you're still delivering a lot of the lines like you're in sequence.
That's huge. Yeah.
So I worked with him on taking this over the heads of the audience kind of a thing where he wasn't connecting with them to bringing it down and making it more authentic and conversational.
Yeah.
And then he really started to connect and he started getting standing ovations. And one of the reviewers said, they remarked about how he broke the convention of the imperious magician and how great it was to, get to know him and whatever. So that's kind of a valuable thing.
And I think it's great that because you do a lot of directing and consulting for other performers, and I think that's an area that a lot of us we tend to try to fly solo when it comes to writing our show, performing our show, and I mean I'm always grateful when I get to be in a show that you're in and then get notes. I go, Bruce, what are the notes? Because we get so used to the things that we're doing that we can make the mistake of thinking that they're finished. And,
oh boy, I got a story about that. And first of all, I want to express my gratitude to yourself and John Armstrong and a few other guys, Simon and
Nick Paul
and Nick Paul.
Simone,
and we kind of have our own little brain trust group and people whose opinions that we really value who can take a look at our material from an objective viewpoint, because it's why most actors don't direct themselves. It's hard to be in the film and then be the director at the same time. You never truly perceive yourself as the audience perceives you. So to have the outside eye is very valuable, and we kind of are able to do that for each other. But I had, years ago, one of the very first professional routines I bought was Mike Caveney's linking coat hangers. No video back then.
No.
Came with a little
just
booklet.
Yep.
And then I learned to do it from the booklet, and I'd never seen him perform this trick.
Yeah.
But I thought this is a great spin off the linking rings to do it with coat hangers, because who hasn't pulled a hanger out of the closet and gotten it tangled up with three more?
Right.
So I did his routine, and then I adapted it with my own persona. And the way in which I performed it, the lines I used, and the velocity with which I did it was different from his, which I only discovered years after I had been performing it, when I finally saw him do it. And he paid me such a wonderful compliment that he says, I do them. I've seen other people do them. I like your routine best. And I'm like, wow, the guy who created it.
That's so great.
Not having the video and not aping what I'd seen was a valuable thing for me, because it allowed me to bring my own sensibility to it. So now I have this 4.5 minute piece, and I'm showing the producers and directors of the Illusionarium show, which was Jeff's show on the ship, some of the routines that I could do in the show. And so one of them, they liked the hangers, but the show was running a little over. And instead of 4.5 minutes, they said 2 minutes.
2 minutes for the same routine.
And I said, hang on. This is not real magic. Sorry to burst that bubble. It's not really magic. And there are a sequence of moves. You can't just cut moves. And no, I'm sorry, 2 minutes. And I kept protesting. And then finally they said, it's 2 minutes or it's out. So when I finally got over the resistance to change and embrace the challenge ahead of me, I started to dismantle what are the moments of astonishment within the routine. What are the key elements that must happen to move it from beginning to end? And what could come out? What jokes don't need to be there? And what moves are essential to delivering the moments of astonishment, and then what are the ones in between? So what I developed was what I call A, B, and C moments. It was a way to break down a routine and say, these are the A moments, best response, best laughs, best astonishment. Right. These are the B moments. These are the C moments.
Yep.
And what you do is you go back and you try to cut out the C moments. And then this stacks the A and B moments closer together.
Right.
Increases the velocity.
Yeah.
And often because of that brings the B moments, elevates them up to an A by virtue of the pacing, because you're increasing your pacing. So I managed to find that I could cut a piece out of the middle.
Okay.
Still deliver just as many elements of moments of astonishment. So I didn't lose any of those.
Yeah.
I just lost some of the C jokes and a couple of the B jokes.
Yeah.
And the entire routine transformed for two reasons. One, everything was stacked closer together.
Yep.
And two, because there was less now, it forced me to focus intently on what remained.
Oh, that's
And then
great.
suddenly I stopped doing things the way that I had for years because that's the way I'd done them.
Right.
And I started to think, no, instead of doing this on link at my chest level,
right,
I need to bring my arms up so it happens right in front of my face.
Yeah.
And I need to do it at half the speed I've been doing it.
Yep.
And when I made these little revelations, the routine got stronger and stronger and stronger. And performing 6 nights a week, twice a week, I had, I went every beat of it. I dismantled and reconstructed. And now I've got this routine that's 2.5 minutes. I'll never go back to the longer routine.
Isn't that fascinating?
So what I thought was a problem and a detriment ended up to be such a blessing because I embraced the challenge.
Ah, that's so good, man. And that translates to so many areas in this business where so many times you feel like you're hitting a wall with something. You're resisting that thing that very well could lead to something greater on the other side of it.
Right.
I'm thinking about right now routines that I have, and I'm like, all right, there's some C material in there I could pull out. It's just time. You know?
I just saw your show at the Parlor this week, and I paid you very sincere compliments afterwards. And one of the things that I think is the hallmark of your work is from the moment you come out, people engage and connect with you, and they sense that you are a genuine person and that you are there to make them part of the fun. And that's a distinction that I like to draw in my work, is that I'm not there to make fun of people.
Right.
I'm there to have fun with them.
Yeah.
That might be some playful teasing at moments.
Right.
But never where they're diminished.
Yes.
It's always, they understand it's always part of the fun. And often they get to do the same to me.
Yes.
Which is
indeed.
fun. Yeah. So you have this tremendous likability and your routines are so well crafted and sculpted, and there's not wasted lines to cut out of them. And you deliver everything conversationally rather than presentationally. And now I just want to make a distinction about that, because I know that John Armstrong, who's a marvelous lecturer, actually has something about that in his distinction between close-up and stage. And he says close-up is conversational and stage is presentational. But I like to draw a further distinction than that. And that is that as a performer, when you're on stage, if you're doing if you're doing close up, it's naturally conversational. There's only two.
Right. Yeah, it's a conversation.
But the idea is, within the context of your presentation as a stage performer, to make it seem as if you are having a conversation rather than presenting the material, even though the nature of the venue requires more of a presentation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, indeed.
So a great illustration of this is David Copperfield.
Yeah.
So I am old enough. And by the way, nobody in Hollywood is over 40. I don't care what you've heard.
Nobody is.
But I'm old enough to remember being in Tahoe on one of the first gigs that I ever did.
Yeah.
And David Copperfield was performing in one of the last small showrooms he ever played.
Wow.
And it was 300 seats. So after he did that, it was only these big shows.
Yeah.
And he came out and he did something that stunned me.
What was that?
I'd never seen him perform live. He came out and he talked to an entire room of people like he was talking to one person.
Yeah.
And then I was like, a bell went off in my head. I'm like, that's the secret.
Yeah.
You talk to an audience like you're talking to one person. Because in essence, that is what you're doing. You're talking to individuals who happen to be gathered together.
Right.
And that really helped me step away from the presentational aspect of what I did, which can put a wall between myself and the audience, and be more conversational and speak to them as if I'm talking to one person.
Bruce, that's so good. You are aware this is a free podcast for people, right? No one's paying for this information. This is. First, I hope you're taking notes. That's it.
My lecture.
That's it, though. That's the juice. That's the good stuff. Because then people walk out of the room and they don't go, I saw this show. They go, oh, I heard this guy and we were talking about this. They were never talking to you, but they feel like they were talking to you.
Yeah.
They feel connected because they are.
I mean, even in your show, if you have moments that are in the outline of your show, you will talk to someone and ask them a question which they can answer spontaneously. Right? You don't have a preset parameter for what they're, maybe that's the wrong way to say it, because often you have a preset parameter, but you don't know with certainty
what they're going to say.
There is no one answer they can give. They can give many answers.
Yeah.
That's part of those things, and those reactions are part of what people experience as having a genuine and unique experience at your show. Well, that obviously is happening for the very first time because that person could have said anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that's the genius of working those kinds of moments in. And then the other thing is, you address the reality of the situation.
Yes.
Embrace that chaos is more powerful than harmony.
Yep.
Because it rivets attention. And try to speak conversationally to people like you're really talking to people instead of talking at them.
So good, Bruce. Okay, we're gonna have to do a part 2 of this. We're gonna have to do a part 2 sometime. I mean, we'll wait a minute, but we're gonna have to come out because we're at an hour now. I know I got to run to the castle here in a minute.
Yeah.
But I am just, my heart is full with joy about what you've talked about, and I know you're not only seeing your work, but then hearing the thought process behind it.
Yeah,
it's huge for me. I know it's going to be a blessing to people. So thank you for giving them your time and doing that.
Thank you.
How can people follow along, see what you're doing, and be a part of the Bruce Gold journey?
Well, I got a few things going on. So one thing that I'm proud of is the Bruce Gold Show.
Yes,
I like to call it the Tonight Show with no budget.
Yeah.
But we actually do have a small budget.
Yeah.
We have a studio. And so what I've been able to do is I said, if I were on the Tonight Show, if I was the host, I would love to bring magic on and bring magicians on.
Yeah.
And so I have this show, and that's what I do. So one of my guests is a non-magician, someone from the world of entertainment, and the other guest is a magician. We have 14 episodes.
Yeah.
It's through a platform called JUL TV.
Yep.
If you look for it on YouTube, or you search for JUL TV on Facebook, or you look for the Bruce Gold Show on Facebook, you'll find information about it. And I've had some really big names in magic come on. Totally. I've been so flattered that they've come on the show, multi-award winners and great performers. And of course you have to come on when we tape again. And then recently I did 8 more episodes where I did one in-studio interview, which will get paired with one interview from the Magic Castle.
Oh, that's great.
And then big names, people from, America's Got Talent winners and people who are luminaries in the world of magic.
Oh, yeah.
They come on the show and they're performing at the castle as part of the show. So I'm real proud about that.
That's great.
Of course, I'm on Bruce Gold at Facebook. I'm not quite to 5,000 friends yet, so you might slip in there. But eventually I'm going to power up the Bruce Gold magic end of that, so you can go there as well. I also coach. I'm going to start lecturing. I'm going to be going up to Apple in Cupertino, California.
Awesome. Yeah.
There's a magician organization that gets together, and the deal is you do a show there for the people from Apple, and then you lecture to the magicians afterwards. So
that's fun.
I'm a big Apple fan, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. And I perform around the country, and sometimes when I do, I'll lecture locally. So you can look for all that. But I'm just so delighted to going from a schedule of really constant travel to being in town more. And as I said previously, I work with Franz Harari quite a bit as a creative consultant. I was a booker for 2 years in Macau for his venue, Franz Harari's House of Magic. And let me tell you, being on the other side of that and booking acts instead of trying to get booked really helped me understand the necessity and the needs of the venue and the booker and what they want. And if I can give everyone like one parting piece of information, one golden rule that will make everything they do better, is that learn to step away from your material far enough to look back at it and edit it with a critical eye, with an honest eye.
Yeah.
It's hardest for us to, as they say in writing, kill our darlings, to take out the bits we love.
Yep.
But the best thing I can tell people is to edit your material, just like I learned with the coat hanger routine, the linking coat hangers. That is the most powerful thing, and it will serve you well, because if you ever get a chance to do television, and there are certainly opportunities now, you will very often be told you'll have 3.5 minutes. Right. And then during the commercial break, they realize they're running long, and they say 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you are clever enough to have gone and edited your material down, you'll have more than one version of it.
Yep.
And you won't be thrown. So edit. That's the secret to most things in show business. Yeah. When it comes to writing, writing is rewriting. It's learning to edit. To film, it's learning to edit the film down. So
that's so good. Friends, go right now, follow Bruce, check him out. And if you've got a project you're working on and you're looking for a consultant, director, this is the guy, man. Reach out, talk to Bruce. I'm sure, he's got time to fit you in there. You'd be lucky to have him. Thank you, man. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to turn this off. We'll keep talking.